Boom! Kafka here, the most hyped unit in Star Rail, has finally released, and everyone is scrambling to see how she performs and how to build her. She is so satisfying to use, she enables a whole new playstyle, and she is just badass. She does need some investment, and her teammates aren't perfect just yet, but she's a solid unit that can honestly pack a strong punch by herself, and maybe even too strong of a punch. Not only is she a competent main DPS, she also heavily boosts the damage of any dot sub DPS in the team. So this means with every dot unit that comes out in the future, Kafka's value and strength will only increase. So we'll quickly go through her stats and how she compares, then her abilities and how they work, traces and what to level first on Kafka, as well as how strong her eidolons are, to then summarize her pros and cons. We'll then look at her best relics and her best light cones, including how cool her signature one is, then discuss her best main stats, as well as speed breakpoints and effect hit rate needs. We'll finish with her rotations, and her best teammates and team compositions, and look at some other builds. Credits to my friends for consulting, and thanks to Kafka Mains where I'm TC staff. If you like this guide and want more, please consider liking and subbing, it really helps me out, and I'm doing an in-depth guide on every unit in the game, updating when wrong. Also, today I'll be streaming a couple thousand Kafka pools on my Twitch, and I will answer all your Kafka questions from chat. Anyway, let's begin. Kafka is a 5-star lightning character and the limited banner unit of the second half of 1.2. She follows the nihility path and is our first lightning nihility unit if you don't count Servo as being an honorary nihility. The nihility path excels in debuffing and controlling enemies. At level 80, her base HP is 1086, her base attack is 679 and her base defense is 485. Her base speed is a clean 100 and her energy cost is 120. So that high attack is really nice due to her heavily scaling on attack, but the rest kind of falters, which is whatever. Finally, as a nihility unit, she has a lower chance of being hit than the tankier paths. Let's now check out her interesting and complex abilities. To summarize, she will apply damage over time with her talent, technique, and ultimate. Damage over time effects cannot crit and will cause the enemies to take damage at the start of their turn. Kafka can detonate these damage over time effects with her skill and ultimate, effectively making these damage over time effects happen immediately, without consuming the dot effect. Damage over time effects are burn, bleed, wind shear, and shock. Freeze and entanglement are not dots, and imprisonment has no dot. Her talent will provide nice follow-up damage and promote teammates going skill point positive in order for her to skill spam for crazy dot detonations. You'll definitely want to prioritize leveling her ultimate first, followed by her skill, then her talent. Her basics are unnecessary, but for those adoring fans, you can max it for the screenshot flex. Her base attack, Midnight Tumult, is nothing special, but looks very cool. It will deal a standard amount of lightning damage to a single enemy, dealing 30 toughness damage, regenerating 20 energy, as well as 1 skill point. Her skill, Caressing Moonlight, is a blast skill. She will deal a large amount of lightning damage to the selected target and a lesser amount to adjacent enemies. That's not all though. If the selected target has any damage over time effects on them, all of those dots will produce damage equal to a percentage of their original damage. This means any ally dots or break dots, and it will take the stats of that ally. This effectively fixes the backloaded problem of standard dot units, as their damage depends on enemies taking turns. With Kafka on board, no more waiting. The detonation will only occur on the selected target, and this skill will let you know by revealing icons above enemies with dot effects, and the web icon will show which enemy will have their dot detonated. If this breaks the enemy's toughness, the break will occur before the detonation and apply a break shock dot, allowing you to instantly detonate it. This skill will do 60 toughness damage to the selected target, 30 to adjacent, and regen 30 energy whilst consuming 1 skill point. Her ultimate is Twilight Trail. It will first deal lightning damage to all enemies, and then it will have a 100% base chance for enemies hit to become shocked for 2 turns. This shock multiplier is insane. It's 290% of her attack at level 10. While shocked, enemies will receive this damage at the beginning of their turn. Lastly, all enemies hit will immediately take damage from their current shock state, equal to 100% of its original damage at max level. So you first apply your giant dot effect and instantly detonate it in 1 swift move. This also works for break dots that happen from this ultimate. This will get upgraded with her traces to detonate all dots, not just shock, as we will see in the traces section. This now means with her skill you have 2 ways of detonating damage over time effects, so in 1 turn of you and the enemy, you can have 3 procs of every dot, which is disgusting. This detonates dots on all enemies, rather than the skill that detonates on a single enemy. So this will deal 60 toughness damage to all enemies and refund 5 energy. Her talent, Gentle but Cruel, is a follow-up attack. After any ally excluding Kafka uses a basic attack on an enemy, Kafka will launch a follow-up attack, dealing a moderate amount of lightning damage to that enemy and having a 100% base chance to inflict shock that's equal to her ultimate shock for 2 turns. This can only be triggered 1 time per turn, so since her ultimate is her main way of applying her shock, this talent is a way to keep the shock uptime high on a single target. Your ultimate shock will drop unless you have mad speed or ways of getting energy, and so this talent lets you keep the damage rolling. This will deal 30 toughness damage and regen 10 energy. Finally, her technique, Mercy is Not Forgiveness, is an attacking technique, so use buffing techniques before it. It will immediately attack nearby enemies, and when you enter that battle, all enemies will take some lightning damage, and you'll have another 100% base chance of applying her ultimate shock to all enemies. This is a final way of making her shock more consistent before she gets her ultimate. I highly recommend you to use this technique whenever you can. As for traces, they are pretty insane. Her first Ascension passive is undoubtedly her best. When her ultimate is used, enemy targets will have all dot effects detonated, rather than just shocks. So her skill and ultimate now will detonate all dots, including break dots, making her boost the damage output of every dot sub DPS in the game and any that come out in the future. Her second passive is a nice quality of life one. When any enemy with a shock applied is defeated, Kafka will regenerate 5 energy. With her big uptime or a servo on board, every enemy will have shock applied to them for a bunch of free energy on starting waves to build up to that deadly ultimate. Her final passive will increase the base chance of her shock application by 30% on her ultimate, technique and follow-up attack, so they now all have a 130% base chance of applying the shock. This greatly reduces her effect hit rate needs, now only needing 29% effect hit rate to guarantee all of her debuffs. A little bit more on effect hit rate needs will come in the stat section. Her trace bonuses will give her a large 20% attack, which is perfect, as well as 18% effect hit rate, making you only need about 3 effect hit rate subs to reach her first needs. Finally, we get 10% HP, which is okay. Now let's review her Eidolons. Just like Blades, these are pretty nice boosts, and they also give her buffs that reinforce her strong role in the future of Star Rail. The first will grant a new effect to her talent. When she performs her follow-up attack, she will have a 100% base chance to increase the dot received by the target by 30% for 2 turns. This is a vulnerability just like Sampo's ultimate, and on a single target, this is pretty much infinite uptime. This is a straight 30% damage boost to all damage over time effects on this unit unless you have extra vulnerabilities, which will of course also buff your dot detonations. Great first Eidolon, giving her about a 15% damage boost and also applying to your team's dots. The only problem with this is to guarantee it against all enemies, you now need 43 to 67% effect hit rate depending on the enemy, requiring way more effect hit rate investment. It's also harder to min-max on AoE enemies. Her second is a team-wide dot buff, giving all allies a 25% damage buff to their dot damage. It's not a vulnerability, it's just extra damage percent, and she just does this by being in the team. This also of course applies to the dots when detonated. Alongside her E1 and detonations, this consolidates her role as a strong dot enabler and will make any future dot teams with her even more of a blast. The more damage percent buffs you have, the weaker this becomes, but it's still a free big damage amp when you're going for those later Eidolons. This will give a nice 10% damage boost for Kafka. Her fourth is all about energy. When an enemy takes damage from shock inflicted by Kafka, she will regenerate 2 energy. This can be from them taking a turn with Kafka's shock, or having their shock detonated by Kafka. This also counts an additional stack for her signature Light Cones of Road Dart, which we'll explain later. It should also work for break effect shocks. This Eidolon, as we will see in the rotation section, will improve her rotation, but it will need her signature to do so. If you have both, you get a nice 10% damage boost. Now her final Eidolon is just insane. Her Kit Shock, no matter how it's inflicted, will increase its multiplier by 156%. Why 156%? I don't know, but if the 290% attack dot wasn't enough, it gets increased to 446% of her attack for a final 474% when you include her E5. So enemies will be taking even more damage on their turns, and every detonation will be even stronger. This is about a 30% damage increase from E5, and is an amazing final Eidolon for those Kafka stands. So what are her pros and her cons? Well, her first pro is a whole new team archetype. Dot teams only had Sampo and potentially Serval, and now with Luca and Kafka on board we can create many more dot teams. Her next is her dot enabling. Not only does she provide dots, she also makes them so much more viable. She front loads their damage, meaning the enemy takes the dot damage directly on top of taking it on their turn as well. What this also means is she can tag along to non-lightning weak fights and still help the team out a bunch. Next is her base chances. Her E1 is a bit of a problem, but the rest is all 130%, so you can fully invest into speed and attack. Of course her damage is amazing too. We'll see the calculations in a bit, but her single target and AoE performances are incredible. She absolutely does not require dot sub DPS to perform well. She also has potential in remaining strong in the future. We only have 4-star dot units right now, so any new dot unit and especially a 5-star dot sub DPS unit in the future will just be a buff to Kafka and her teams. A time limited pro is her 1.2 banner is perfect. You have her 3 dot sub DPS all in one banner, and their eidolons scale them very well. Finally, her design is awesome. For cons, we have speed shenanigans. Your damage relies on both your speed for detonations and the enemy speed for normal dot damage ticks. Speed is the rarest sub in the game for a reason. Next, her damage is primarily dot damage unless you're a cheeky Kritka fan. This means you'll need to avoid crit subs, which to be honest you're probably already doing by accident. To continue, her damage requires skills. Her basics don't detonate and don't provide much energy, so you'll need skill point positive friends. Another thing is that although she doesn't need her dot sub DPS friends to thrive, she still doesn't have many teammates or any 5-star dot sub DPS, so her teams may feel underwhelming when directly compared to other units' full 5-star teams. Next we have heavy investment. Dot units naturally scale harder than normal units on their stats and their traces due to the fact that their dots cannot crit. This means that every trace level is essential, and Kafka's even more so, because her detonation percent is improved per level 2. Finally, we have more units to build. If you built your standard carry setups, they can definitely benefit Kafka or Kritka, but for optimal Kafka teams, you'd want to build dot sub DPS. Now that that's done, let's check out her best relics. Kafka's best min-max set is actually the Quantum set, funnily enough. As long as you're facing quantum weak enemies or you're bringing Silver Wolf or Pella, the Def Ignore provides more damage than the Lightning set because of how defense reduction stacking works. If you're bringing Asta as your third slot, for example, instead, then you can just go with the regular. Our best standard build will be the 4-piece Lightning set. The damage percent is vital and the attack percent will be up permanently. However, Kafka will be wanting speed, so 2-piece Hackerspace and 2-piece Lightning is very competitive. Speed is the rarest substat, and having 6 extra speed can compensate for worse relic luck. For playing ornaments, Spacing Station is really her only option. Pangalactic drops your damage for no gain before E1, and Von Whack is unneeded. For main stats, you'll go attack percent chest. Effective rate chest is possible at E1. For boots, speed is mandatory, and then lightning orb and attack percent rope. Energy rope is a DPS loss. For substats, get your effect hit rate to 29%, and then 43% if E1, and then chase attack percent and speed. Since she has no additional stat needs, you can opt for break effect or even crit subs as the other stats, but speed is important. So, talking about speed, speed is a very important discussion topic of Kafka. More speed means more detonations, but too much speed at a loss of other stats means a loss in damage unless you got big dots from teammates. You also need teammates to provide skill points. So the first important speed breakpoint you want to hit is 120 for Spacing Station. This is achieved from speed boots. The next is 134, giving you an extra turn every 3 cycles including the first. This requires 4 speed subs and you should all be hitting it. The final one is 151, or about 140 if you include her signature. 151 is very hard to hit without her signature, but still possible. Well, this allows us some extra turns here and there, but the main goal of 151 is to allow Asta to bring you to 201 speed, granting you an extra action every cycle. This requires E4 Asta and needs her to skill spam, and with E5 Asta you can go a bit slower. So if you have 2 skill point positive teammates that are also 140 speed, then maybe you could go for this, but it's very hard to reach, and I just recommend going for 134 first, and just letting Asta boost your speed with a skill point positive playstyle. So first, I won't be discussing Kritka or Break Kafka too much in this guide, as they are not always optimal, but they definitely have their place and I won't be bashing them. If you do go with these builds, here are the following relics and main stats. With calculations I did, Crit Kafka is a DPS loss, since you trade either your extra attack percent or speed, granting you less damage or less actions. Remember, even if she has a lot of critical damage, she has a ton of non-critical damage, and both of these scale with attack, so losing attack is bad. With external attack buffs, Kritka comes out ahead, but then you have to think about how you get these buffs. By adding Asta's attack percent and speed buff at permanent uptime, it still doesn't just beat putting Sampo in the team. Kritka consists of using crit and probably Tingyan and Asta to carry damage, and it definitely works to some extent, but it's hard to pull off skill point wise and stat wise. Also remember that the calculations are done with the 100 speed enemies, and fast enemies will make Kafka even stronger. As for Break, Kafka instead relies on breaking, and if you don't, she loses a lot of damage from the same concept, since you want speed to detonate said breaks or attack percent for her main kit. If you do break, the damage obviously comes out ahead, but this only works versus lightning weak enemies. As for light cones, you have some great options. As for her signature, it will first increase damage by 24%, perfect for buffing her whole kit. Furthermore, after every attack launched by the wearer, their speed increases by 4.8% up to 3 times, for a final 14 speed buff for Kafka. Very strong. Finally, if the wearer hits an enemy that is not afflicted by Erode, which is this light cone signature debuff, that hit will have a 100% base chance to inflict this Erode effect for 1 turn. This counts as being shocked, and enemies will receive an extra dot equal to 60% of the wearer's attack. This stacks with normal shocks and break shocks, as it's an additional outside source, so 3 shocks from Kafka is possible. This provides an additional dot to detonate, and it will be applied before her attacks detonate. This is her best in slot and gets better with Eidolons being mandatory at E4. You won't need any more effect hit rate than usual since it's per hit and her skill has 3 hits. This gives us a 99% chance of proccing it with our normal 29% effect hit rate. Her next is Goodnight Sleep Well, and at S5 the two are very close in damage. That is if you don't hit a great breakpoint with her signature and have consistent 3 debuffs on the enemies. In the Name of the World is nice for her too, for the high base stack and for the attack percent, which will buff her dots during detonation. And finally, the damage percent is nice. The effect hit rate is of course unneeded though. Eyes of the Prey is usable, but the effect hit rate only shines if you have E1. Before that, Fermata will be better and is free to play. For her rotations, you'll want to skill spam of course. Basics are useless to her. Without her follow-up attacks, you're looking at 4 turns of skills to get her ultimate. With them considered, so once per turn, she has a 3-turn rotation. At E0 you can even go Tutorial Light Cone for a 2-turn rotation, but it needs defense reduction and you'd have to remove it from a potential Silverwolf or Pella, and the effect hit rate is useless until E1, so it's lots to sacrifice and it's just for fun, and it's a pretty bad DPS loss. Having E4 reduces the need of 1 follow-up without her signature for the 3-turn rotation. And with Energy Rope and her signature, you can 2-turn ultimate versus a single target enemy, while still having an incredibly strong Light Cone and not needing any conditions for the energy. Versus 2 targets or having external energy, you don't need an energy percent rope, so I would recommend going attack percent rope at all times and finding a way to get this energy. This can be a kill, quid pro quo, shared feeling, or just being hit. As for her best teammates, she has a few supports that can really benefit her, and a few sub DPS. For supports, we first have Silverwolf. Silverwolf can of course enable Mono Lightning, and her defense reduction and resistance reduction will buff every part of Kafka's kit, including any additional breaks. Silverwolf E2 benefits Kafka team's effect hit rate needs, but it's nothing too special for Kafka pre-E1. She also applies additional debuffs for Goodnight Sleep Well. Just don't go break Silverwolf and delay the enemies, it will hurt Kafka's damage. Silverwolf's skill point positivity is a bonus too. Pella is strong and in AoE very strong due to her AoE defense shred. With Tutorial you can have a permanent uptime on this, and in AoE teams Pella will be very competitive. For Harmony you have Asta as an attack percent amp. You will want E for Asta though to really use her. Attack percent scales dots very hard and the speed is essential. She can also enable the 201 speed Kafka setup too. More Kafka turns means more dot detonations, especially important if you want to abuse break darts. Asta also has a tiny burn, but this isn't big enough to notice. And Asta finally can be skill point positive. You can also use Bronya, even if that sounds a bit weird. Bronya is just so strong. Her damage percent will buff Kafka's kit and dots, and the extra turn means of course an extra detonation. This is heavy on skill points though, and will require either skill point neutral Bronya or the fastest Pella Luocha skill point farming you have ever seen. For sub DPS you have the obvious Sampo, Luca and Serval. Sampo brings wind shears and dot vulnerability to boost Kafka's and his dot damage. Luca has bleeds and a universal vulnerability debuff and the strongest breaks in the game. And Serval has lightning synergy for mono lightning and break shock extension. Sub DPS can also include break DPS like Break Asta, Break Himiko, Break Sushang, and any other break unit that you can think of that are not imaginary, quantum, or ice. So for team comps, here is our template. You'll pick of course Kafka, then a dot sub DPS or break sub DPS depending on the enemy weakness. You'll then want Asta or Pella or Silverwolf, and then finally a solo sustain. For neutral elements, so ones that aren't lightning or physical or wind weak, you can either force mono lightning with Serval and Silverwolf, or go Kafka alongside Sampo or Luca. Serval's viability dropped slightly due to Kafka having way better shock uptime, but in AoE boss fights, unless you min-max your talent, Serval can still help out, and the break extension is still very strong and has not changed. Versus some Lightning Weak though, Luca and Sampo may actually end up being better than Serval. For Luca and Sampo versus neutral elements, Luca and Silver Wolf will be stronger in single target and Sampo and Pella stronger in AoE. Acid can replace Silver Wolf or Pella in these teams, and we really can't say which team is better until the H-Star simulator is out, as too many variables come into play. Kafka means suggests that triple dot is nice, but much harder to use than the dual dot teams, and it won't be outperforming in damage anyway. With future dot units, if they can also fill debuff a role like Pella, then the triple dot setup can be very strong. Remember that Asta and Silver Wolf provide survivability to the teams with their speed or slows. Pella's freezes also provide a similar effect, with also making enemies take turns faster and thus dots faster as a neat niche bonus. For your slow sustain, Japard with Trend is a fun option and he's very strong, Luwatcher is great too, and Bailu can be used for mono lightning. In these teams you want your allies to apply dots or break toughness bars, for Kafka to detonate with her skill and ultimate, and then you'll want them to basic attack for Kafka's follow-ups. Skill point positivity or neutrality from her teammates is needed for Kafka to skill spam. You can also make allies faster on the first turn to enable Kafka to gain 1 extra turn of detonations. It's nice, but it's not mandatory. This is however easily done with Kafka with her signature, as she'll gain ramping speed. If you run Break Kafka, you need to break, and if you run Kritka, you'll need harmony supports and you'll be speed tuning to maximize your talent activations. I hope you all enjoy your Kafka and enjoy this guide, and if you did, don't forget to sub for more. Thank you to all my amazing members, thank you to all you viewers, and thanks for watching. Have a Guoba day.